Welcome to Roofing Uncovered, the podcast where we talk about roofs without going over your head. I'm your host, Dustin Brooks, and we are here to uncover everything commercial and industrial roofing. We'll cut through the jargon, we'll get to the good stuff, safety, sustainability, innovation, whatever's shaping our industry's future. Whether you're an architect, business owner, facility manager, or roofing contractor, this will be packed with insights, packed with knowledge to help you in your business. Let's get started. Today, we're exploring the differences between certifications for commercial and industrial roofing products and assemblies, testing standards in North America, how those compare to other parts of the world, and we'll be focusing on FM, UL, ASTM. What does all of that mean? Let's dig in. Let's start with FM. FM stands for Factory Mutual. And what Factory Mutual is part of FM Global. And FM Global is an insurance provider, an insurance carrier. FM created FM approvals so that they could have standards and certifications to make sure that the products being utilized were safe. Safe for the people that they were putting inside of these buildings that they're insuring, safe for the environment, and obviously lessening their liability and their risk in the event that they have to cover in an insurance claim. The standards that they cover as part of FM, Factory Mutual, wind uplift, fire resistance, hail. They look at weatherability and they look at foot traffic, adhesion, and a few other categories as well. Primarily FM, or some people say, refer to it specifically as FM 4470. And that is the certification, the approval for flat, low slope roofing systems, roofing assemblies. And FM 4470 looks at it as a system and as an assembly. So versus just a particular product and saying, okay, this PVC membrane is FM approved in general. That's not how that works. So that PVC membrane is only FM approved for specific assemblies. And that assembly would be the PVC membrane, say mechanically attached, screwed down over a wood deck or over a steel deck with certain types of insulation or certain types of cover boards, or adhered down, glued down. And so the fire resistance and the wind uplift testing and all of that is specific to the assembly, so specific to the other products within that roofing system that are tested. So rather than just testing one of the products, they test that product holistically with the entire assembly. And so that's where FM is really unique, in that it looks at it as a full assembly and tests wind, fire, hail, and all of that, but it does not test the products individually. So it doesn't look at just the polyiso insulation and test the rigidity and any specific characteristics of that. It doesn't break down physical characteristics of the different components. It just tests the assembly as a whole when it comes to fire, hail, and all of that. For example, they have a new expanded their hail resistance rating. They're seen as kind of the crown jewel in the United States. They have it from moderate, severe hail. Now they have a VSH rating, which stands for very severe hail. And it is real life simulated type ice balls that are blasted out of a cannon after they weather the membrane in various situations, but it's part of the whole assembly. And that has definitely positively changed the industry. One of the downsides to any sort of testing is that they're using brand new material from the factory. And I know from experience that when they do the flame spread tests and the fire resistance test as part of FM 4470, they're using brand new roofing materials. So the membrane, the insulation, all of that, none of it has gone through real life weathering. And a lot of times they don't even put it through lab weathering. It's brand new material. So as far as looking at that compared to a roof that's 10 years old, we don't know the differences because they're not testing that as part of the certification, this approval. Same thing when it comes to weatherability, when it comes to looking at the hail. They're testing the hail on brand new roof systems, brand new roof products that haven't been out in the real world environment. Now, do they weather them? Yes, they put them through some heat aging. They put them through a particular UV cycle. They can do their best to simulate real life in a lab, but simply there are limitations to that. So the downside I see to some of these certifications assemblies is that they are testing brand new products. So just because a TPO roof membrane gets a VSH, the top hail rating, in an assembly, does not mean that in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, that hail won't destroy that roof system, because it's going through a whole different set of exposure after that point. So something really important to have in mind when we're looking at these certifications, these testings, and just because something is a check mark that it's got the best hail rating from FM does not mean that it's going to protect or insure you and guarantee that you will not have hail damage in the future. One thing that's not talked about much in our industry with FM, oh yeah, it's an FM approved product. Okay, what's the wind uplift? What's the hail? What's all that? Okay, cool. But an important part about FM is that the manufacturers that have products that are listed and approved by FM go through regular audits. So they have a third party coming in, making sure that they're not changing how they manufacture the product, that they're not changing the formula or the raw materials, and everything is staying the same. So at Triton, we're an FM approved manufacturer, and so we are audited. And so it gives our customers the assurance that we're not making changes to the product that was approved by FM and was tested by FM. So we'll move on to UL. All right, UL stands for Underwriters Laboratories. And UL, and it's a renowned organization around the world for their science and their testing and their expertise. They focus a lot on electrical safety, fire safety. So specific to roofing, they have UL, for commercial roofing, they have UL 790, which is a fire test, a fire rating. It does use the same ASTM E108 fire spread methods that FM 4470 uses. So UL and FM's fire classifications are the same when it comes to Class A, Class B, Class C. Obviously, everybody wants Class A. And if you don't have a Class A, essentially your material is probably not going to be accepted for use on a roof in the United States. So UL 790 is really just an alternative to FM 4470's fire component. With flat and low slope roofs, UL stops there. They do not go beyond the 790 fire rating. They don't do hail. They don't do wind uplift, or they have capabilities and they have tests for it, not really recognized. Now, in the residential roofing industry, yes, UL has a widely recognized and utilized hail classification for steep slope roofs. So metal, shingles, slate, clay tile, those sorts of things, UL is the standard to be looked at when it comes to hail, weathering, fire, and all of that. When it comes to flat and low slope commercial industrial roofs, FM 4470 is the standard that's looked at here in the United States. All right, so we'll pivot to another one quick here, and that is Miami-Dade. Miami-Dade are counties in the state of Florida, particularly Southeast Florida. So in the state of Florida, Miami-Dade, in a way, as it's called, is a lot of times recognized as what a manufacturer needs to have for their product to be utilized in the hurricane and high velocity zones of Florida. Obviously, it's unique. Florida has the highest risk of hurricanes and high speed wind events. So Miami-Dade was created in those counties to protect their consumers and their building owners, making sure that they were using products that would be able to withstand or should be able to withstand high wind events. So the state of Florida, though, is unique in that the state of Florida requires all products with construction, roofing in particular, to be certified and approved by the state to be used anywhere in the state at all. And they also have a classification on whether that product can be used in the HVHZ, the hurricane zone, or not, using Miami-Dade. The state of Florida building code and department technically supersedes the Miami-Dade county, but still Miami-Dade is recognized. If you're in Southeast Florida, you don't have Miami-Dade NOA. It makes it much more difficult for you to get your product approved, even if you have the state of Florida one. Regardless, within the state of Florida, you have to have meet the right wind uplift criteria for those assemblies to be utilized. Now, what does Miami-Dade test? What do they use as their standard in the state of Florida? They primarily use FM. So they will use the FM 4470 static wind uplift test as the benchmark for stating whether or not an assembly can be used in the hurricane zone or not. And we'll talk a little bit about static versus dynamic wind uplift here in a second. All right, now we're going to move to ASTM. You hear that word a lot in our industry. ASTM. ASTM is the American Standardized Testing Methods that are used for all sorts of types of industries. And so ASTM has specific standards, groups of tests, and then individual tests. So it's important to know the difference there because manufacturers say, okay, for example, PVC. Our PVC is ASTM D4434 compliant. It meets that ASTM standard. Well, that standard is a group of individual tests: tear strength, elongation, UV, and those are all separate ASTM tests. ASTM D this, ASTM E that. And those individual tests make up a standard that says it must meet a minimum value on each of these individual tests. All right. A lot of people don't break down further and look at those individual. They see, is it a yes or no, pass, fail on the standard? But it's really important to look at those individual tests because sometimes important individual tests aren't included as part of the little standard groups. And some of the standard groups don't really apply for certain sets of products. So I think it's important to look at individual ASTM test performance. For example, E96, which is water vapor transmission. Though it may meet the minimum, some manufacturers' products are going to be better than others. Same thing with elongation and tensile strength, tear strength, UV. How much UV did they test? Did they just do the minimum to meet the standard? Or did they go to a much higher, stricter ASTM test with longer UV and more intense climate? So when we talk about ASTM standards for roof coatings, for example, they're very limited. They're highly influenced by the chemical suppliers and manufacturers who sit on these councils that adjust and create these standards. So there's, in my opinion, a biased opinion, there's bias in these ASTM standardized packages. Well, there's not biasness on the individual tests. You either performed at that value or you didn't. Your value is either higher or lower than a competitor. So that's why looking at them on a test-by-test basis is very important. In the USA market, I think that will yield better results and better guidance for designers and for building owners and clients because complying with the bare minimum using brand new material in a factory and lab controlled environment does not predict excellence in performance. So just because you comply and meet the bare minimum with a brand new factory and lab controlled product, that does not predict that it's going to perform well on the roof. So testing is one thing, certifications is one thing, real life results, the credibility and the references from clients is a whole nother thing. Lastly, with U.S. certifications, we'll talk about CRRC, which is Cool Roof Rating Council. This is just specific to reflectivity and energy efficiency. So the CRRC was created to establish a registry of products to confirm whether or not they're compliant with various cool roof solar reflectivity standards around the country. Some cities, some counties, some states have different requirements. For example, in California, they have the Title 24 law, which sets a minimum SRI, which is solar reflective index. And so CRRC is based in California, so they can have this registry of all the different products and what their SRI value is. So then designers know whether or not it's compliant with state of California laws. So the manufacturers become members of the CRRC, and then they list their products and the test results of those products with accredited and recognized third-party ASTM labs. There's initial, there's rapid lab aging, and then there's 3-year test farms. So they actually put the product out in real-life situations in different parts of the country, cold and warm climates, and they provide aging. So they age them for 3 years, and then they test the reflectivity and the emissivity again. Because we all know that a brand new bright white product, and again, a lab and factory controlled environment, hasn't been outside, is going to have the highest reflectivity and emissivity. And what happens once that's installed on the roof? It starts to get dirty. It gains pollution, it gains dirt and dust. Obviously, that reflectivity is going to decrease. Well, this 3-year aging gives a real life 3-year age and reflectivity and emissivity value to that. All right, that's enough on those. How does the testing in the United States compare to the testing in Canada and Europe? I'm going to try to go through this a little bit quick because we could really, really dive deep. All right, so in Canada, they have standards like CAN ULC S107 for fire, and then CSA A123 for wind uplift resistance. So in my opinion, compared to Canada and Europe, the US standards and certifications are lacking a little bit. Again, my biased opinion, but I'll try to explain why. So the CSA, which is the Canadian Standards Association wind uplift test, is dynamic compared to FM, which is static. In 2012, the Single Ply Trade Organization, based in the US, stated the CSA dynamic wind uplift test should be used instead of the static FM test because it closely mimics real life wind events. Static wind gusts don't occur. When wind is blowing in a weather event, it's not the same speed the entire time and the same pressure. It changes, it fluctuates. And so the dynamic test that CSA uses is a dynamic fluctuating test to simulate real life wind and gust fluctuations that occur. Now, the CSA also then has standards like ASTM for all types of different membranes, modified, EPDM, TPO, and then beyond that, low slope roofing products are evaluated and certified by the Canadian Construction Materials Center, CCMC. This registry lists all the products and assemblies nationwide that are compliant with Canadian Building Code. In the US, we have International Building Code, but there's not a nationwide registry attached to that to show which products and roofing assemblies are compliant with International Building Code. The only thing we have similar to CCMC is what I talked about, and that's the registry and the product approval system in the state of Florida, where they require them to be part of that in construction projects. So in Europe, they have ETA, which is a European Technical Assessment, which is issued by the EOTA, which is a European Organization for Technical Approval. That's the primary certification route for low slope and flat roofing products in the EU. And with that certification, manufacturers are able to use that CE mark, which is something that a lot of people recognize the image of. The technical assessment is specific to the type of product and the type of application. And those ETAs, those technical assessments, are often dozens of different tests to be able to get that certification. With fire testing alone, there are 4 different types of fire tests used in Europe, depending on the region of Europe that you're in. Some countries require something different due to their climate zone. Besides fire and wind, they test dynamic and static puncture in various conditions, tearing, flexibility, adhesion. While we have ASTM tests here that test the same performance characteristics individually, they're not part of FM or UL certification. So if you have FM, they don't look at your ASTM test results as far as elongation, flexibility, weatherability. They test ASTM E108 to get their fire and all of that. But with Europe, they have various levels included too in these technical assessments. So expected lifespan, climate zone use, foot traffic. So you may have a technical assessment that approves a roofing product in mild climates with minimal foot traffic for 10 years. And another product may have a certification that it can be used in a harsh environment for 20 years with heavy foot traffic. So they offer a wide range of predictability and results for these different products, which is great in providing guidance. Those classifications don't exist in the Americas. And then you have the UK, which is outside of the EU, but they have what is called BBA, the British Board of Agrimon. And this body assesses, tests, certifies building products. It's also recognized outside of the UK. BBA is cool because it has a guaranteed performance expectation, a legal peace of mind protection, and a documented service life, which is cool. So our PVC that we provide, for example, has a 40-year documented service life as part of the BBA certification for it. Additionally, in all these European certifications, they look at slip resistance. They look at the texture and the coefficient of friction of the product. Obviously, that's not even a conversation here in our industry. I talk about that in other podcasts. When it comes to liquid applied membranes and coatings, Europe is much more intense and heavily scrutinized with their ETA and their certifications for it. So though I may be ruffling some feathers here, there's a lot to be desired and lacking in the United States roofing certifications and approvals when it comes to product and assemblies compared to our counterparts in Europe and even some of the tests that they do in Canada. Because technologies are changing, they're improving, they're getting better. The roofing industry is always evolving. Our test methods, our certifications, and our standards should also evolve. Now, I'm not saying they don't, but the fact is the fire test and the wind uplift test that we use for FM for Factory Mutual has been used for decades and decades. Would I say it's tried and true? No. I think progress has been made with other test agencies around the world that more simulates real life and predicts better real life results, and we need to go to that. So to wrap up, we've covered the key differences between FM, UL, Miami-Dade, CRRC, ETA, CSA, ASTM, the list just goes on and on. But it's important to at least have a basic idea of what these things mean. Now, this doesn't cover everything and break it all down, but hopefully it does give you a better understanding of these important names and test standards and methods that are utilized in the commercial and industrial roofing industry. So I want to thank you for tuning in to another episode of Roofing Uncovered. Please go to our YouTube page, like, subscribe, and share. Appreciate it.